It began, as disasters often do, with something ordinary, a wet spring, then another. Then, as one newspaper put it, a year when the clouds forgot to part. In the narrow courts of London, rainwater dripped from broken gutters and gathered in blackened pools. In the countryside, the fields lay drowned beneath sheets of grey water. The year was 1879, though it might have been any of a dozen such years in the long, damp century of Victoria's reign, an age when the sky itself seemed to press down on Britain. From the Shetlands to the south coast, rain fell without mercy. Crops rotted, coal carts sank axle-deep in mud, and the Thames swelled until its banks wept. In the cities, soot and rain mixed to form a greasy drizzle that turned cobblestones into slick mirrors. The people had no word for climate change, but they knew misfortune when they felt it on their skin. The cave was the Victorian world itself, a world of industry, smoke, and ceaseless rain. The Victorians were a people obsessed with measurement. They recorded rainfall as they recorded births, deaths, and profits. In the 19th century, Britain's climate grew wetter by the decade. Between 1870 and 1890, some regions saw rainfall nearly 25% above average. In the West, Wales, Lancashire, the Lake District, the downpour felt biblical. For farmers, the weather was everything. A single season of rain could erase an entire year's labor. Wheat mildewed in the fields, barley sprouted before it could be cut, hay rotted in the stacks. The nation that prided itself on feeding the empire sometimes could not feed its own. In the industrial cities, rain took a different shape, not floods that drowned fields, but a slow, steady siege on health and livelihood. Smoke from factories trapped the moisture, creating what doctors called the wet fogs. They clung to the skin like sickness. Chimneys dripped and bricks bloomed with mold. Whole neighborhoods became breeding grounds for fever. To walk through Whitechapel or Ancoats after days of rain was to move through a world half liquid, gutters overflowing, children barefoot in the filth, the air heavy with the sour scent of rot. The poor had no umbrellas, and even if they did, they had nowhere dry to go. In 1882, a journalist for the Illustrated London News wrote, "In the East End, the rain seems to find its home. It falls as if by choice upon the people least able to resist it. Imagine a single room. One window cracked, the ceiling bowed by damp. Inside, a family of 5, a dock laborer, his wife, and 3 children. The walls run with moisture. Their bedding smells of mildew. The fire won't light because the coal is wet. Outside, rain beats a tattoo on the roof of tin and slate. For countless urban families, this was daily life. Londoners joked that they lived in weather, not under it. The rain seeped through everything, walls, clothes, lungs. The poorest tenants lived at street level, where the water gathered first. Cellar dwellings flooded, wooden floors warped, wallpaper peeled away like wet parchment. In such conditions, disease was an uninvited guest. Typhus, bronchitis, and tuberculosis thrived in the damp. Doctors made rounds with bottles of cod liver oil and little hope. Hospitals overflowed. And yet the rain kept falling. Factories too suffered. Steam engines slipped, machinery rusted, and workers trudged through the mud each morning, their boots squelching with every step. The smell of wet wool and coal dust filled the air. Children who sold matches or papers on the street came home with pockets soaked and coins reduced to green copper. Women scrubbed stairs for pennies, their hands red and raw from cold water. In the gaslit gloom, some Londoners turned the weather into superstition. They said God was washing the world clean of sin. Others, more practical, hung their clotheslines indoors and prayed for a dry day to return. But it rarely did. If the city was misery soaked in soot, the countryside was ruin soaked in mud. In the wet years of the 1870s and 1880s, rural Britain faced repeated crop failures. The Great Agricultural Depression had already begun, driven by cheap American grain and mechanized farming. The rain turned hardship into disaster. In Somerset and Norfolk, farmers watched their fields turn into shallow lakes. Sheep drowned on low-lying meadows. Potatoes rotted underground. The oats that did survive came up thin and useless. Laborers went unpaid, their wages postponed, until the weather turns. It never seemed to. Villages that had lived for centuries by the rhythm of the seasons found themselves broken by nature's monotony. Roads became impassable. Wagons bogged down in ruts. The post arrived late, and news of the outside world slowed to a trickle. Families burned damp wood for heat, their chimneys smoking like sorrow, and yet life went on. Children were still born, church bells still rang. The parish still gathered for Sunday service, though many arrived barefoot, their boots too wet to wear. The rain blurred the boundaries between work and despair. It was no longer an interruption of life. It was life itself. The Victorians knew how to endure. But endurance had its limits. Continuous rain meant stagnation. In the soil, in the air, in the bloodstream of the city. Standing water bred cholera. Damp homes bred consumption. Doctors warned that a man might live through a famine, but die of damp. In 1853, an outbreak of cholera swept through Southwark after weeks of torrential rain overwhelmed the drains. The poor drank water thick with filth from the Thames. Families lost children in days. One mother told a relief officer, "It's not the hunger that kills us, it's the wet." In the countryside, starvation took a quieter form. When crops failed, wages vanished. Men walked miles through the rain in search of work, leaving their wives to stretch what little they had. Stale bread, turnip soup, a few eggs if the hens still laid. They patched roofs with rags, stuffed cracks with straw, and prayed the wind would not change. Parish relief was meager, and the workhouse loomed like a storm cloud of its own. Outdoor relief often came in the form of wet blankets, damp coal, and promises. For the destitute there was no escape from the water. It seeped into the very fabric of poverty. Yet amidst the despair, the British press romanticized the endurance. Illustrations showed hardy farmers trudging through rain with stoic smiles, while sermons praised the weather as a test of moral fiber. Behind the rhetoric, real people drowned quietly in the monotony of survival. If there was a quality that defined the Victorian poor, it was resilience, sometimes proud, sometimes bitter. In the flooded hamlets of Lincolnshire, families built walkways of broken barrels to reach their doors. In Manchester, mothers dried laundry over factory steam pipes. In the Welsh valleys, miners sang hymns underground as rain thundered above. Every community found its own rhythm beneath the endless sky. Children turned puddles into playgrounds, floating twigs as boats. Street musicians adapted their songs to the weather. The melancholy ballads of rain became popular fare. The sound of dripping water entered the national imagination, in poetry, in music, in the quiet prose of letters written on damp paper. Inventors, too, took note. The waterproof Macintosh coat, first patented in 1824, became a symbol of middle-class practicality. For the poor, oilskins and tarred cloth served the same purpose, heavy, smelling of fish and hope. Umbrellas multiplied across the cities like dark flowers. Still, the rain shaped the architecture of endurance. Houses were built with higher thresholds, cellars filled with sandbags, and in some towns the council raised pavements by a foot or more. Yet for every improvement, new misery found its way through the cracks. But there were moments of grace. Community soup kitchens appeared in church halls. Neighbors shared coals and candles. Even the smallest act of warmth seemed miraculous when the world was so cold and wet. In those years, survival was not a single act, but 1,000 tiny choices made against despair. The Victorian age ended not with a revolution, but with a sigh, a long, damp exhalation into the 20th century. The rain still came, but the world had changed. Modern drainage, gas heating, and concrete began to replace the leaking roofs and sodden streets. Yet the memory of those gray decades lingered like the smell of wet wool. Writers such as Charles Dickens and Thomas Hardy had already captured the mood, the weary endurance, the sense of a land forever washed and worn. In their stories, rain was never just weather. It was a character, relentless and moral, a force that revealed the truth of human life. For the descendants of those who endured, the landscape itself carried the memory. The mossy bricks of old terraces, the green-black stains on church walls, the sunken lanes that fill at the first drizzle, all are reminders of a time when Britain lived beneath an unbroken sky. Today, climate historians trace those patterns of rainfall and speak of natural cycles, ocean currents, and volcanic ash. But the Victorians didn't need explanations. They simply looked upward and saw what they feared most, nature's indifference. In the end, the story of endless rain is not only meteorological. It is human. It is the story of mothers trying to dry a child's clothes by a failing fire, of farmers watching their harvest dissolve, of workers coughing in the fog and still turning up for the morning shift. The rain tested everything: roofs, crops, health, patience, faith. And somehow, through that long, wet century, the people endured. There's a painting by John Atkinson Grimshaw, dated 1881. It shows a London street at dusk, slick with rain. Gas lamps gleam on the cobblestones. A solitary figure walks beneath an umbrella. The light is faint, the sky still heavy, but there is beauty in it, a quiet resilience. That perhaps is the truest image of Victorian Britain. A nation soaked but not drowned, weary but still walking. When we picture the Victorians, we think of steam and empire, invention and order. Yet beneath it all ran the steady sound of falling rain, a rhythm that shaped their cities, their work, and their will to survive. Every brick darkened by drizzle, every factory whistle echoing through the fog, was part of a larger story, a people learning, day by day, to live with the weather and with themselves. And so, as the rain continues to fall on London's glass towers and the green fields beyond, it carries with it an echo, the faint heartbeat of an age that refused to give up, even when the sun would not shine.